may I introduce His Royal Highness Prince Charles.
Mr. Flanagan, Adina Ursula, ladies and gentlemen. I must just say, before going any further, what a real treat that was just now to hear that traditional Irish music. I could travel a very long way to hear that, I promise you, and you cannot stop your foot tapping, and that's the wonderful thing about it. Thank you, all of you, so much for that, and the composer for doing something so special for this occasion. We shall remember it and treasure it, I promise you, for the rest of our lives. But, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you what a joy it is for my wife and myself that we are able to be in Ireland once again. This is a country we both so love visiting, not least because of the wonderful warmth of the Irish culture. As we've been reminded throughout this visit, and do please forgive my attempt at coining a new shanachal, Ní bhíonn sránsairí unseo ach cúrde nó ar níon lat. There are no strangers here, only friends that you haven't yet met. For the ancient land of Ireland does have a remarkable tradition of cultural and spiritual creativity, and it can be a powerful magic for some. It is no surprise that it has inspired so many great writers, musicians and artists over the years. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 150th anniversary of the birth of W.B. Yeats, there could be no more apt county to visit in Ireland than Sligo. This is where Yeats felt most at home, his land of heart's desire. And it was places in Sligo like the Dooney Rock, Knocknaria Mountain and the islands of Lough Gill that prompted many of his most memorable poems. Yeats's poetry is widely studied in schools and universities throughout the United Kingdom. It is not a stretch to say that it is through Yeats's work that many British people are first introduced to Ireland. After all, could you have a better guide than someone who, to quote from his citation for the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote inspired poetry which in a highly artistic form gives expression to the spirit of a whole nation. Ladies and gentlemen, relations between Britain and Ireland have changed hugely since my visits in 1995 and in 2002. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 and its successors have transformed for the better the political and security landscape across these islands. Only last month, my son Harry and I were with the President and Mrs. Higgins and Mr. Flanagan in Turkey as we paid our respects to the soldiers who fought and died in the Gallipoli campaign. Even by the dreadful standards of the First World War, the death toll and suffering were horrific. However, the bravery of the troops on all sides was extraordinary. Amongst them were over 10,000 Irishmen, Connaught Rangers, Royal Dublin Fusiliers and Royal Munster Fusiliers, and innumerable others fighting side by side. Tragically, over 3,500 Irish soldiers were killed and many more wounded at Gallipoli. At the time, many Irish nationalists hoped that their participation in the First World War would bring together people of different traditions across these islands. Sadly, of course, it didn't turn out that way. But 100 years later, in remembering the scale of the suffering and sacrifice of that generation, we are at last finding common ground. Working to end the conflict in Northern Ireland brought the two administrations in Dublin and London closely together. My mother, the Queen's state visit to Ireland 4 years ago, and the President's return state visit last year were further demonstrations of the historical change in our relationship. The success of those visits is clear evidence of the maturity of our relations, which are now better than ever, based on mutual respect and friendly cooperation between two sovereign neighbours who share a huge amount in common. We've shed our inhibitions about acknowledging the value that we bring to each other as trading partners, as places to find work, as sporting rivals, and as contributors to a lively exchange of ideas and culture that enriches everyone. After all, the Irish have made a unique and important contribution to Britain, a wonderful warmth of laughter, spontaneity, and imagination. Neither Ireland nor Britain enjoys such a deep and broad engagement with any other country. Our current blessed era of friendship and cooperation is not, however, founded on pretending that the past did not happen. We all have regrets. As my mother said at Dublin Castle, with the benefit of historical hindsight, we can all see things which we would wish had been done differently or not at all. I'm only too deeply aware of the long history of suffering which Ireland has endured, not just in recent decades, but over the course of its history. It is a history which I know has caused much pain and much resentment in a world of imperfect human beings, where it is always too easy to overgeneralize and to attribute blame. At the end of the day, however, we should never forget that our acquaintance has been long, and we can turn that knowing into something new and creative. We need no longer be victims of our difficult history with each other. Without glossing over the pain of the past, we can, I believe, integrate our history and memory in order to reap their subtle harvest of possibility. Imagination, after all, is the mother of possibility. Let us then endeavour to become the subjects of our history and not its prisoners. Ireland has had more than its fair share of turbulence and troubles. Those directly affected do not easily forget the pain. Recent years have shown us, though, that healing is possible even when the heartache continues. In August 1979, my much-loved great-uncle, Lord Mountbatten, was killed alongside his young grandson and my godson, Nicholas, and his friend, Paul Maxwell, and Nicholas's grandmother, the Dowager Lady Braben. At the time, I could not imagine how we would come to terms with the anguish of such a deep loss, since for me, Lord Mountbatten represented the grandfather I never had. So it seemed as if the foundations of all that we held dear in life had been torn apart irreparably. Through this dreadful experience, though, I now understand in a profound way the agonies borne by so many others in these islands, of whatever faith, denomination, or political tradition. Despite the tragedy of August 1979, the memories that Lord Mountbatten's family have of Classibon Castle and Mullamore going right back to 1946, are of great happiness. I look forward to seeing at last the place that he and they so loved, and to meeting its inhabitants. Many of them showed the most extraordinary outpouring of compassion and support to both Lord Mountbatten's and Paul Maxwell's families in the aftermath of the bombing. Their loving kindness has done much to aid the healing process. A number of us will also gather in St Columba's Church at Drumcliff under Bear Ben Bulben's head for an ecumenical service of peace and reconciliation. The poet Yeats, who is of course buried at Drumcliff, once wrote, "And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow." As a grandfather now myself, I pray that his words can apply to all those who have been so hurt and scarred by the troubles of the past, so that all of us who inhabit these Atlantic islands may leave our grandchildren a legacy of lasting peace, forgiveness, and friendship.
On behalf of Sligo, I would like to present you with a musical composition, specially commissioned to mark this event. It is Sligo's gift to you, and one that is full of meaning and symbolism. On this momentous occasion, where, in the words of An Túchtaráin na hÉireann Michael D. Higgins, a shadow of the past has become the shelter of the present, it is considered fitting to commission a musical composition from Michael Rooney, our own Michael Rooney. The challenge set for Michael was to draw our shared history and reflect in music the deepening relationship born out of a difficult past. I believe in this composition of 3 movements, he has achieved that objective. The first movement is a graceful, regal piece that builds on Michael's composition on Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth on her visit to Ireland as head of state. The second movement draws on Yeats's legacy in the form of a musical built around his poem, He Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven. It is recited by Orla Nolan, where the feelings and imagery invoked in verse are captured appropriately in a waltz. Movement 3 is in 2 pieces. The first piece is a lament that acknowledges a pained and troubled past. It is performed by the acclaimed violinist Niamh Crowley, who was presented with the Tagore Gold Medal in 1999 by you, Your Highness. The lament recognises the pain of the past, but moves seamlessly into the second piece, Reconciliation, an upbeat and positive movement reflective of the present deepening relationship. As with the music, so too the choice of musicians. It's full of symbolism. Drawing from a rich vein of musical talent in Sligo, we have deliberately chosen the next generation, a generation with whom we look forward with hope and confidence, and in whom we trust our traditions, culture and heritage. And I have no doubt it's in good hands. Finally, music makes audible what ultimately becomes visible. It is therefore my pleasure to present this composition as a gift in honour of your visit to Ireland, and to Sligo in particular, Gur mai got a gorgeal air.
Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the half light of light and night and the half night. I would spread my cloths under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, for you tread on my dreams.
We are also honoured to have the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Charlie Flanagan, Choctadala, with us today. The Minister will now address you.
Your Royal Highnesses, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure this afternoon to represent the Government at this extraordinary civic reception here in Sligo, a most beautiful part of the country, as we can see, but a part of the country that my wife Mary and I know very well and visit regularly. I'd like to begin to adding my warmest welcome to the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. This may be your first joint visit to Ireland, but I know that both of you have come to know our country very well over a long number of years, and you are most welcome once again, but particularly in the northwest of Ireland. Your past visits have brought you mostly to Dublin and the eastern half of this island, but this time we're delighted that you've crossed the Shannon and come west. Your varied programme over the past couple of days reflects the important themes for both of you. In particular, I note your dedicated work on sustainable development, where Irish-British cooperation can be seen first-hand at locations that you've seen yesterday, at the Marine Institute in Galway, and later on today at the Institute here in Sligo. Your Royal Highnesses, so much of your visit here is about the quality of the relationship between our two countries in this 21st century. Relations that can be aptly described as warm and close and neighbourly and dynamic, with further improvements all of the time. Indeed, Sligo's majestic landscape has inspired many of our great writers, including contemporary authors Neil Jordan, Sebastian Barry, and the recently deceased and much lamented Dermot Healy. Here you will find energy and inspiration in the art, in the music, in the science, in the literature, and the poetry, and most of all, perhaps, among the wonderful people that you will encounter here in Sligo today. Above all, this, however, is Yeats' country, a land beloved by W.B. Yeats, born, as you quite rightly pointed out, 150 years ago this year. Yeats may have been born in Dublin, as it happens in Prince of Wales Terrace in Sandymouth. However, Sligo served as his home and indeed his muse. It was home too for his artist brother Jack B., whose magnificent paintings you've just seen upstairs, and many of which depict in an extraordinarily wonderful way the landscape, the life, the times of the people of the northwest of Ireland. You spoke, Your Royal Highness, on your first official visit 20 years ago of the prospect for real and lasting peace on this island. In your inspiring remarks just now, you have returned, not surprisingly, to the themes of peace and reconciliation and dealing with the contentious legacy of the past. Issues that still challenge us, and issues that form the basis of the recent Stormont House Agreement, agreed on the eve of Christmas Eve in the company of the 5 party leaders in Northern Ireland and the Secretary of State Theresa Villers and myself representing our respective governments. In 2011, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth spoke poignantly in Dublin of events, and I quote, "events which have touched us all, many of us personally, and are a painful legacy." She spoke, and again I use her words, of all those who have suffered as a consequence of our troubled past. William Butler Yeats once wrote, "Words alone are certain good." When the flow of great words finally ceased and Yeats was laid to rest in Drumcliff churchyard, unremarked among the enormous crowds that gathered for his burial was the renowned Belfast poet Louis MacNeice, who wrote, "I note how a single purpose can be founded on a jumble of opposites. We have since built a resolute peace to match our warm words of certain good. Our two countries have created a shared vocabulary of cooperation, at times making reconciliation our single purpose. Your Royal Highness, your journey, your personal commitment to that shared purpose of peace and reconciliation. And this afternoon will bring, I hope, a further healing, as well as reflect on those dreadful moments across these islands that cast a dark shadow across cities and towns, from Belfast to Birmingham, from Derry and Dublin, Warren Point and Warrington, as well as here in Sligo and nearby Enniskillen and further Monaghan. As you travel up the Sligo coast this afternoon to the service of reconciliation at Drumcliff and onwards to beautiful Mullaghmore, you will see just why Lord Mountbatten loved the harbour, the landscape and the community of this part of our island. I want to acknowledge the presence here of many distinguished guests from Sligo, in particular my Dáil and Seanad colleagues, members of Sligo County Council and public representatives. I want to acknowledge the presence of our ambassador in London, Don Mulhall, your ambassador, Your Royal Highness, in Dublin, Dominic Chilcott, both of whom continue to play a pivotal role in fostering good relations between our respective islands. I want to acknowledge the presence here of Tommy Gorman, the RTE Northern reporter, and indeed one of Sligo's own, who again for many years has made a huge contribution in fostering good relations. I know this will be a most enjoyable occasion for you both. When we met briefly in Turkey, you charged me with the task of finding winners at Sligo races. That, Your Royal Highness, is an invidious task for any politician to offer winners, much less at Sligo races. However, I do have with me the card for this evening. Sligo, Wednesday the 20th of May. The Duke and Duchess of Cornwall maiden hurdle is at 6:30. Ellen's Pub Maharao, a place well known to most people here, indeed to myself also, is at 7:30. But not to give you tips, I think it's quite extraordinary that there are some familiar names here that you might be tempted to have a flutter on. And I offer a recommendation of Prince Ashford, or King Blue, or Mystic Princess, or JKT Prince. In any event, I know I speak for everybody here when I wish Your Royal Highnesses an enjoyable afternoon in Sligo, some pleasant times in Northern Ireland before your return, and we hope that we will see both of you back on our shores again at the earliest opportunity. Thank you for being here.